You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 3rd of January 2014. Sikhs, Hindus criticise use of Asian in crime talks. Romanians top UK crime list before they've even arrived. Sold out, flights and buses full as Romanians and Bulgarians head for the UK. UK firms place 8,000 job adverts in Romania for taxi drivers, hotel staff, nurses and even doctors. Muslim husbands with more than one wife to get extra benefits as ministers recognise polygamy. Only 1,067 vehicles set ablaze in New Year's Eve in France. Nick Griffin MEP from the Welsh Valleys. Brewer replies to Starbucks letter with snarky note $6. Pedophilia, doctor claims it's a sexual orientation. Wal-mart recalls donkey product in China after fox meat scandal. Thought for the day, why oh why do things happen to us? And finally the will, a New Year laugh. UK news. Sikhs and Hindus criticise use of Asian in crime talks. British Sikhs and Hindus have launched an online petition asking politicians and media to stop using vague terms like Asian while talking of child sex grooming by gangs as it besmirches their communities. Four leading religious groups, the Hindu Council UK, the network of Sikh organisations, the Sikh Media Monitoring Group and the Sikh Awareness Society have sponsored the online petition, The Times said in a report. World at 8. Well, perhaps the media will listen to these people because it doesn't listen to us nationalists at all. We've been saying that for years now, so over to the Sikhs, perhaps they can make waves. Romanians top UK crime list before they've even arrived. Britain's borders swung open to anyone from both countries from midnight as EU restrictions were lifted, Daily Star writes. And police experts predicted a fresh wave of crime as the country already struggles with an influx of foreign crooks. Shock figures reveal that the Eastern Europeans already topped crime league tables before Britain opened its borders to millions from the two countries January the 1st. Almost 1,000 Romanians were detained by police in just one country alone over the past 3 years. Travel agencies in Bulgarian capital Sofia and Romanian first city Bucharest have reported huge demand for tickets to the UK. Budget airlines have doubled the number of planes to cope with demand. At Sofia's central bus station, a large poster showing Big Ben, a London double-decker and a red phone box advertise a new life in Britain. All seats on 2 BA jets from Sofia to Heathrow, ferrying more than 300 passengers out on Sunday and Monday, have also been sold. Tory MP Philip Hollowbone, 49, said, "We are importing a wave of crime from Romania and Bulgaria. Romanians are 7 times more likely to be arrested in London than a British national. Romanians account for more than 11% of all foreign offenders, despite making up, at the moment, just a tiny proportion of residents." Fears continued to grow as Romania opened a consulate in Bristol. World at 8. Full BA flight sort of flies in the face of ITV's report showing no one was lined up to come to the UK by train or plane. But of course we should all be used to the spin by now. The mainly Asian reporters couldn't help but smirk when filming empty departure lounges, but as World at 8 said a year ago, their 5th column arrived many moons ago, and these are just the follow-ups. Sold out, flights and buses full as Romanians and Bulgarians head for UK. Bulgarians and Romanians were last night preparing to travel to Britain as restrictions on working here are lifted from January the 1st. Almost all flights from Romania to England are full, even though one airline doubled the number to meet demand, with one-way tickets selling for up to £3,000 each. And all tickets for seats on buses leaving the Bulgarian capital of Sofia until January the 9th have been snapped up. World at 8. I'll say it again. This wave is just the rest of the clans coming over. The elderly, the ill and the pregnant. Most of the so-called workers have been here for years. UK firms place 8,000 job adverts in Romania for taxi drivers, hotel staff, nurses and even doctors. British companies have placed nearly 8,000 job adverts for Romanians to come and work as taxi drivers, hotel staff, nurses and even doctors. Recruitment drive, companies are advertising British jobs for Romanians on this website, including across the NHS as restrictions were lifted on January the 1st, 2014. Nurses, South East London salary £1,250 per month. Taxi drivers, London salary £1,400 to £2,000 per month. Erotic dancer, Mayfair, London salary £4,000 to £8,000 per month. Bus mechanic, Scotland, salary £25,000 to £30,000 a year. One advert for 10 unskilled bakery workers has received 527 applications from the Romanians, even though it doesn't say where the jobs will be in Britain or how much employees will be paid. However, many jobs available will only pay the minimum wage of £6.31. This is 7 times the minimum hourly rate of 88p in Romania. The first recruitment fair in Romania for NHS specialist nurses was held by the University Hospital of South Manchester Trust in Bucharest last month. More than 62,000 jobs were advertised by British firms in the former communist country in 2013, up from nearly 42,000 2 years earlier. Other popular fields were cruise ships, restaurants and catering, agriculture, construction, engineering, childcare and elderly care. World date. God help the elderly, these people are simply not qualified, although they may be cheap. Third world people and a third world country, all in our country now. Muslim husbands with more than one wife to get extra benefits as ministers recognise polygamy. Ministers have decided that, even though bigamy is a crime in Britain, polygamous marriages can be recognised formally by the state, provided they took place overseas in countries where they are legal. The outcome will chiefly benefit Muslim men with more than one wife. DWP have stated less than 1,000 polygamous marriages exist in the UK. World date. What is the penalty for lying when in government? Psst, wanna buy a bridge? European news. Only 1,067 vehicles set ablaze on New Year's Eve in France. The much lamented tradition of torching cars to mark the arrival of the new year claimed more than 10% fewer vehicles this year. By French standards, it was a peaceful New Year's Eve. Only 1,067 cars and vans were destroyed by arson, a significant reduction of more than 10% compared to the number of vehicles set ablaze last year, according to Emmanuel Val, the Interior Minister. All things considered, it was a positive result, Mr Valls told a press conference on Wednesday. Car torching has been adopted as a modern New Year tradition by some young revellers in France. The practice reportedly began in earnest amongst youths often in poor neighbourhoods in the 1990s in the region around Strasbourg in the east of the country. Last year, some 1,193 vehicles were burnt, according to official figures. World date. I love this. Youths in poor neighbourhoods. Well, it is. But it is the migrant youths doing it. Valls is, like our MPs, trying to pour oil on very troubled waters here and not succeeding. Now I hand you over to Nick Griffin MEP, who today is talking about bankruptcy and the middle classes versus immigration.
Well, obviously my bankruptcy is all over the mainstream news today, so for once, let's make World at 8 not that much difference. Let's talk about it. The most important thing that everyone needs to understand is that this does not prevent me from standing as or being an MEP or an MP. It's a personal matter purely for me, and it's nothing to do with party finances. I will be the lead candidate on the British National Party's list for the northwest of England in the European elections. We've got a great campaign already being organised in the pipeline, and we're fighting to win that and other seats. The issue arose from a dispute with a firm of solicitors, Messrs Gilbert Davis and Partners of Welshpool, who I would recommend that nobody ever uses if they want half-competent legal representation. But at the time, they were the only people I could get. They represented me when the Electoral Commission and their rat pack of 70 taxpayer-funded lawyers sued me and tried to put me in prison. I only stayed out of prison in the end because I sacked Gilbert Davis and Partners. I've been advised since by other lawyers that I've got multiple grounds for professional negligence actions against them. I tried to reach an agreement under the insolvency voluntary agreement system with them, pending the outcome of such actions, but they were extraordinarily intransigent and simply wouldn't budge. They turned down the chance of significant sums of money each month just for the privilege of bankrupting me and getting nothing, or very, very little. Very odd. Some people have said perhaps odd indeed. It certainly wouldn't be the first time that all our opponents, including lawyers, have worked in cahoots to try to do us down. It also won't be the first time they failed. On the brighter side still, I'm freed of the need to expend money and energy on several vexatious court cases launched by different opponents. Better still, from the point of view of my constituents, I've now got personal experience of the IVA system and the bankruptcy system, which is going to go into the debt booklet, which I'm partway through producing, because it's not just a problem for me, this. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of other good, hard-working Brits end up under mountains of debt and in the bankruptcy courts every single year, and they need advice. It's a growing problem, and I'm now in a position to give that advice from personal experience. Other politicians can usually at best offer abstract advice to their constituents. I can now genuinely speak and write from personal experience of the IVA system and bankruptcy. I've been there, I've done that, I've got the t-shirt, I can help people. Just one point on the way about on that t-shirt is, of course, my visit to an insolvency practitioner in the Midlands just before Christmas, in fact. Just before Christmas. Time flies. In the course of that, I got a parking ticket. It's one of those days, it never rains, but it pours. When I really had a close look at it, I was quite surprised to see that although the traffic warden, possibly a Nigerian, who can tell, had got the car number right, he'd got the model and the colour wrong. So rather than simply paying that, I looked it up online, got some good advice there, that under such circumstances you should always appeal a parking notice. So I did, and I got a letter back from the council today. Dear Mr. Griffin, thank you for writing to us. We have cancelled your penalty charge notice after carefully considering what you say. What I said was simply pointing out that it was the right registration but the wrong make and colour of car. There's something wrong here, and my understanding is that therefore the charge notice was invalid. Obviously my understanding is right, because they conclude their little letter, the penalty charge notice has now been cancelled and you may treat the matter as closed. So, should you or anyone you know get a parking ticket at any stage, do check the small print carefully, and if there's some kind of error like that, do appeal. It's very easy, it takes a couple of minutes, and they've got no choice but to let you off. So there you go, a really good piece of news, even if you never do end up bankrupt. So, very often, when our opponents do these things to us, like trying to send me to prison for speaking out about grooming, they blow up in their faces, and this too won't do them any good. So it begs the question, why are they so desperate to try and get rid of me and get rid of the BNP? Well, I think we see at least part of the answer today in the Daily Mail, where there's a report headlined about how immigration is now as big a worry for the middle classes as for people on low incomes, which of course was the bracket who were most affected by immigration until relatively recently, and therefore basically the British National Party's biggest supporters. The report in the Mail goes on to say alarm about immigration is soaring among the middle classes, a study revealed yesterday. There's a new shift in public opinion. While the lower paid and those in low-skilled jobs have long seen competition from migrants as a threat to their jobs and earnings, higher earners have been assumed to benefit. They go on to talk about how cheap it was to hire plumbers, nannies and all the rest of it. But, and I quote, the study by Ipsos Mori shows that fears about the impact of high immigration on hospitals, schools, transport, housing and utilities have begun to undermine middle-class complacency over the issue. The analysis, based on a series of polls, shows that amongst those classed by the advertising agent industry as A, B and C1, that's professional and managerial jobs, the proportion who think immigration is the country's most serious problem rose from 20% in 2013 to 30% last year. And this is the very moment when Nigel Farage decides to curry even more favour with the BBC by saying he and UKIP support immigration and especially talk about opening the doors from Syria to huge numbers of refugees from the pro-Wahhabi refugee camps outside Syria. Yes, he seriously is suggesting we should keep out Polish plumbers, but let in huge numbers of Syrian jihadist sympathisers. Strange to the point of being electoral suicide. So it's really important for us now to be around giving voters a real choice and a real alternative. A party that doesn't hedge our immigration policy around with ifs or buts or qualifications or mealy-mouthed civic nationalism. Our position is very simple. Britain is full. We need to shut the door to all of them. Romanian and Bulgarian gypsies, East Europeans and the whole of the third world. It doesn't matter where they're from, Britain is full, shut the doors. But we also need to recognise that isn't enough. The threat from the differential birth rates of certain immigrant communities is such that it's not just our culture and people's economic well-being that's at risk, but our long-term, and not that long-term in fact, ethnic identity. We are scheduled to become a minority in our own country by 2060 at the latest. That's a fact and it needs to be talked about, and the British people need to have an electoral choice to say we don't want that to happen, therefore we want not just to stop immigration but reverse the flow. The British are the indigenous peoples of these islands and as such have a right to take effective, well thought through action to preserve our majority status in our homeland. Not just for a few extra years, but forever. That will take quite radical action, and that's what we're here to advocate and stand for. Yes, it must be peaceful action. Yes, it must be humane, and yes, it must be principled, but it must also be effective. And, as that new opinion poll proves, it's also potentially very attractive to an ever-growing number of ordinary, decent Brits. That's why they want to get rid of us, and it's why it's so good that they failed, are failing, and will continue to fail. It's why it's so important that we're here to stay, and that we work together to run the most effective BNP campaign ever to win in the May elections. With Nigel Farage throwing votes away by the shed load, victory is there for us to seize with both hands. Let's just do it.
Thank you very much, Nick. As ever, very informative. And I wish you and your family a very, very happy new year from World at 8. Thank you. World News. Brewer replies to Starbucks letter with snarky note and $6. A small Missouri brewery has responded to a cease and desist letter from Starbucks by sending the coffee chain a cheque to cover what it calls the profit from use of the word frappuccino. A cheque for $6. Exit 6 pub and brewery in the St. Louis suburb of Cottleville named one of its brews the Frappuccino, spelt slightly differently from the word Starbucks uses for its blended beverages. That prompted an attorney for Starbucks to send Exit 6 a letter on December the 9th, which noted that the Seattle-based company is the owner of a number of world-famous trademarks, including the well-known Frappuccino trademark. The letter also said that the words are phonetically identical and that Exit 6 use of Frappuccino is likely to cause confusion, mistake. In his sarcastic response letter, Exit 6 owner Jeff Britton also wrote that the brewery never thought that our beer-drinking customers would have thought that the alcoholic beverage coming out of the tap would have actually been coffee from one of the many stores located a few blocks away. The letter said Exit 6 would no longer use the term Frappuccino and would instead refer to its beer as the F word. Britton said in a telephone interview that the new batch of the F word sold out in 3 hours. He's contemplating making more based on the calls, emails and Facebook messages of support he said he's received from around the world. Pedophilia. Doctor claims it's a sexual orientation. When a nationwide clamour in the United States amongst homosexual activists resulted in many states legalising the same-sex marriage, many concerned Americans worried the debate would open the door for even more egregious perversions to become culturally accepted. While the radical left roundly lambasted such predictions, recent court rulings regarding bigamy and increased efforts to legitimise the sexual abuse of children indicate the concern was well founded. Dr James Cantor of Toronto's Centre for Addiction and Mental Health is at the forefront of this disturbing trend. He recently presented his findings that paedophilia is a genetic predisposition that is as deeply rooted as any other sexual proclivity. This is the same argument that has been used for decades to rationalise homosexuality. It should come as no surprise the left, which is tolerant of virtually any view short of biblical morality, is moving towards explaining other reprehensible behaviour in the same manner. World at 8. OK, so that lets off the many Africans who rape babies and the Muslims who abuse female children, does it? Would this idiot be so rational if one of his kids was raped? One can, if one looks hard enough, put any aberrant sexual behaviour down to genetics, which could however swing the other way one day when we're not so understanding anymore. Wal-mart recalls donkey product in China after Fox Meat scandal. Wal-mart Stores Incorporated, the world's largest retailer, has recalled donkey meat sold at some outlets in China after tests showed the product contained the DNA of other animals, the US company said. Wal-mart will reimburse customers who bought the tainted 5-spice donkey meat and is helping local food and industry agencies in eastern Shandong province investigate its Chinese supplier, it said late on Wednesday in official posts on China's Twitter-like Weibo. The Shandong Food and Drug Administration earlier said the product contained fox meat. The scandal could dent Wal-mart's reputation for quality in China's $1 trillion food and grocery market, where it plans to open 110 new stores in the next few years. China is the largest grocery market in the world and is set to grow 1.5 trillion by 2016, according to the Institute of Grocery Distribution. This is another hit on Wal-mart's brand, meaning wealthy shoppers will start to lose the trust they had before, said Sean Ryan, Shanghai-based Managing Director of China Market Research Group. CMR estimates Wal-mart's market share fell from 7.5% to 5.2% over the last 3 years. Donkey meat is a popular snack in some areas of China, although it only accounts for a tiny fraction of overall meat consumption. In 2011, China slaughtered 2.4 million donkeys, according to the country's livestock industry yearbook. The US retailer has had a troubled past in China. In 2011, China fined Wal-mart along with Carrefour a combined 9.5 million yuan, which is $1.57 million, for manipulating product prices. Wal-mart was also fined that year in China for selling duck meat past its expiry date. Isn't fox meat more expensive than donkey meat anyway? Asked one bemused user. World at 8. I'm feeling sick already, not at the fact that millions of poor donkeys were killed, but probably the way in which they were killed. Hopefully they're too big to boil alive, but with the Chinese you never know. I think it would be good if the Chinese actually ate each other. You know, the old and sick and criminals. They could do a roaring trade in human burgers, couldn't they? I didn't know you could eat fox meat. Just shows, doesn't it? No one nation is ever too civilised or progressive not to revert to the primitive. Thought for the day. Oh why must it happen to us? Oh, the whinging and the whining of the average Brit is getting on my tits. We start the new year with the sodding weather being its usual ghastly self, but at least we are not knee deep in snow at the moment, although I did have a bit of a nasty turn on a ladder in a high wind trying to tie back one of my trees, which was rather like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, whilst my better half was hanging on to the ladder for grim death, and I had a moment when I thought, why couldn't I have a gardener to do all this? Cue the Romanians, of course not. But whilst luckily at the moment we have escaped flooding, the back lawn looks like a green waterbed and I'm hoping we don't sail down the hill to the main road. And I am really sorry for the people who were cut off during the Christmas celebs. But get real. Our workers do not work over Christmas. Period. They just don't. And some woman old enough to know better, haranguing the PM about it, may have made the ITV news several times on a short news day, but in reality did very little good other than make her look like a fishwife. And why did she have her studs in her lips? Hundreds of people were in the same boat. It was and is an act of God, not a deliberate terrorist atrocity, but probably the penalty of using too much power for too many people and building houses on unsafe floodplains for the most part. But all the whining and news and bullshit about why did it have to happen and all the committees that will be set up and paid for to find out why exactly the rain fell in the quantities it did will all be a complete waste of time and money. Well, poor old Michael Fish wasn't there to blame this time, and the weather forecast sounded like the coming of Armageddon, so no one can say they haven't been warned. Bad weather, my friends, is de rigueur now in the southwest and southeast, but it's worse up north, where they could have snow. Anyone for a committee? This whinging and whining started in full throttle about the time of the death of Princess Di. Why, where and why again went on for months, and is still going on. I was no admirer of her, to be honest, but she was young and a mother, so it was a waste of a life. But if the public really thought about it, the mother of the future King of England taking off publicly with the Caro Fred and leaving her kids behind was not going to fly at all, was it? The hypocrisy of the papers who tore her to pieces the day before the crash and yet wept maudlin tears the next days went unnoticed by the masses, who must have wasted an entire season of flowers which did nothing but encourage their maudlin tears over a woman they didn't know and certainly did not understand. But you get my drift, don't you? The media adores the whys and wherefores. When something usually trivial happens, or indeed when something even more serious is afoot, it depends on what news they want to hide and what they will use to hide it. The new Help to Buy scheme applauded by Cameron was shown on the news and showed a young attractive woman with a child. So does this mean a single earner can apply? If so, how much deposit do they need? If none, this government is encouraging people who, if they lost their jobs, could not afford the repayments. Similar to the subprime debacle, whilst the price would initially rise of that property, if there was a raise in interest rates or another dip, that rise would disappear and the house would be repossessed and sold on probably to Asians waiting in the wings as they did a couple of years ago. So why bring this in? Of course it featured in a small way in the media compared to the welcoming of our Keith Vaz standing at an almost empty airport welcoming in other migrants, of which he was one many years ago. Now I know what little John thinks of us, but I stand by that man. He is funny. And his description of Vaz and the few Romanians herded together for him is hilarious. Of course, as World Date has already said, too little, too late. The bulk of the Romas, Romanians and Bulgarians are already here. What we will get now are the remnants, the needy and the ones who have no intention of working but will resort to crime and living off their relations who either receive benefits or a salary. They will still leech off our health service despite rantings from our government and our educational facilities already at stretching point with many years of immigrant abuse by the Asians, Arabs, Africans and migrants from the Far East, who took cashing in on a country to a whole new level. Now the media are full of the fact that not many will come, but the main point is of course ignored. We are already too full to accept any more of any people from anywhere. I don't care if they're from the planet Zog, which has blown up. Niet, nada, no, nein and non. We wail why whenever anything goes wrong. The weather, the leaves on the line, you name it, we can wail about it and form committees. You bet, the more the merrier, which go on for years and come up with the blindingly obvious in the end. Here are some examples. Grooming gangs. Well, we'll have several committees and groups and form new expensive businesses to ponder on why they happened. But we will of course have to ignore the Muslim element here by submerging it in the Asian communities and also bringing in the Eastern European trafficking gangs. That way we can go on for years getting paid to ignore it. It also helps to dismiss most of the reports as coming from vulnerable girls who would make bad witnesses in court and thus waste the mainly Asian CPS staff's time, which we won't do. Child abuse in the home. Well, we love this one. We can weep and rent our clothes for months, given some poor little mite who's been tortured to death, with the "oh, why did this happen? How could this be allowed to happen?" Well, we will ignore that these crimes are mainly committed by newcomers, whether from Europe, the African subcontinent or India or wherever. We must never harp on that fact in multicultural Britain. We will, however, hark back to the Jamie Bulger case to avert similarities. We will then blame the social services who have failed to act appropriately but still give them money when they sue. White parents or partners who commit this crime will be taken to court and the whole thing given airtime the whole way through. However, if foreign or of the Muslim persuasion, especially, damp it down or form a new committee to pore over the facts and do absolutely nothing. However, we can always stop parents smacking their children. That might be a deterrent. Now, how can that be a deterrent to the sort of adult who tortures or starves their own child to death? It isn't, because the sort of people who do that do it behind closed doors, not walking round Tesco's with a grumpy, ill-behaved child in tow. Time for yet another committee. Public murders and police shootings. Well, if black on white, ignore it, but express publicly a mild form of outrage and totally blank out any reference to Islam, if there is any. We do not upset Islam. If white on black, well, you know the scenario. Lots and lots of committees and investigations, police arrests and re-arrests and thousands of hours of court times and TV appearances of every relation the victim ever had, even if they were not in the country at the time, with a certainty of a sainthood and a promise of a lovely new job in the House of Lords for the mother of the victim. Incidentally, we have informed the police that as regards shooting to kill, that's okay if the killer is white, but not if the killer is black or brown or any shade not IC1. We must not be seen to be racist in any way. immigration. Refer to other matters if possible, the weather, sports, celebs, anything, just anything. If really stuck without a suitable committee quote, refer to official immigration stats which are always spare with the truth. Film large quantities of fruit farmers who employ migrants and are happy with it, and at the same time show pictures of our youth getting drunk or being suicidal, and put it down to the fact that the migrants are saving our farming, etc. The public love that one. It makes them feel comfortable that they're helping a stranger whilst virtually killing off their own progeny. Show some migrants who can speak English for God's sake and have jobs, albeit ours, to come over for. The Brits love that. In fact, whilst weeping and wailing over the loss of their own safe jobs, they can see the reasoning behind advertising vast amounts of jobs which our youth could do in the wilds of Eastern Europe or India. It all makes sense to them. The mere fact that pictures of the sales in Harrods which looked as if they were taking place in Peking doesn't rattle their chains at all. The fact that TB is now rife in London and other cities also doesn't faze the Brits. They must be a happy bunch, except when it comes down to the weather. So we mustn't upset the apple cart by showing the millions of immigrants who have come to our shores at all. Just allow them to fill the soap slowly, and the great British public won't notice that they are working to feed, clothe and educate millions of strangers who really dislike them intensely. It's all a great big secret. Now I could go on for ages, but I won't. You can see how we are being hoodwinked whilst at the same time allowing us to wail over things which really don't matter in the long term. Rather like when some poor bastard loses it and kills a few people. Awful. But out come the anti-gun people who really don't want anyone in this country to own a gun for self-defence. The US under Obama is the same. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. And I personally would like a chance to defend myself if necessary without resorting to a kitchen knife. But there again, our government don't want an educated population who could treat guns with respect. They're happy with the gangsters killing with them, and the police as well. We are not masters of our own destiny in this country anymore, and weeping and wailing is, perhaps, the only way we can make ourselves heard. But do we? I think not. And finally, the will, a New Year laugh. Doug Smith is on his deathbed and he knows the end is near. His nurse, his wife, his daughter and 2 sons are with him. So he says to them, Bernie, I want you to take the Mayfair houses. Sybil, take the apartments over in Pall Mall. Jamie, I want you to take the offices over in the city centre. Sarah, my dear wife, please take all the residential buildings on the banks of the Thames. The nurse is just blown away by all this, and as Doug slips away she says, Mrs. Smith, your husband must have been such a hard-working man to have accumulated all this property. Sarah replies, property? The arsehole had a paper round. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy new year and a very happy and safe and dry weekend.